there's this eerie story that happened to a family living in my small, quiet hometown, tucked away next to a massive, mysterious forest. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and it felt like you were living in a different era, far from the chaos of the big city. So, there's this family, Luke, his wife Sarah, and their two kids, Eve and Jake. They had this lovely old house with a sprawling backyard that bordered the edge of the woods. The forest, it was a thick, dark expanse, the kind that made you wonder what secrets it held. One summer evening, Eve and Jake were playing in the backyard. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the trees. You could hear the crickets, and there was a light breeze rustling the leaves. It was perfect, until Eve let out this bone-chilling scream. I can't even imagine what it was like for their parents, Luke and Sarah, who rushed to the backyard to find Eve hysterical and claiming that two scary-looking creatures had dragged Jake into the forest. Can you believe that? It's the stuff of nightmares. Luke, he's a no-nonsense kind of guy, he didn't waste any time. He grabbed a flashlight and plunged into the forest, calling out for Jake. Sarah, she was crying and trying to console Eve. But the thing is, after a thorough search of the forest that night and in the days that followed, there was no trace of Jake. It's like he vanished into thin air. It's the kind of stuff that sends shivers down your spine. The whole town got involved in the search. It was a massive effort. The police, neighbors, even folks from nearby towns, all helping Luke comb through the forest. They had search parties, dogs, drones, the whole shebang. But nothing. Not a single clue about what happened to Jake. A week went by, and it was a long, agonizing one for that family. You could see it in their eyes, the despair, the fear. People in town, they started talking, saying that maybe Jake was gone for good, that he was probably, not around anymore. And then, just when everyone had almost given up hope, in the dead of night, there was this knock on their front door. It was loud and insistent, like someone was desperate to get in. Luke and Sarah, they raced to the door, and when they flung it open, there stood Jake. Imagine their shock. He was there, right in the doorway, perfectly fine, like nothing had happened. But here's the kicker. He had no memory of being gone. He thought it was still the same day he disappeared. He couldn't recall anything about where he'd been or what had happened to him. It's as if time hadn't passed for him at all. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? Jake's back, safe and sound. But things weren't the same. The family, they couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. You see, there were times when they'd catch Jake talking to someone they couldn't see, when he was alone in his room. It wasn't like normal kid imaginary friend stuff. No, it was different. He'd have these hushed conversations, like he was discussing secrets with an unseen presence. It sent shivers down their spines. They didn't know what to make of it. Time went on, and the family decided to move to another town, leaving that eerie forest and all the memories behind. Jake grew up, he had a seemingly normal childhood, went to high school, and was getting ready to head off to college. But even now, every once in a while, his parents would catch him having those strange conversations, like he's still talking to someone they can't see. It's the kind of story that makes you wonder, what really happened to Jake during that week he was gone, and who or what was he talking to in that room? Maybe it's best left as one of those unsolved mysteries that gives you the creeps, but it's also a stark reminder that there are things out there, things we can't explain, lurking in the shadows of that big, old forest. So, yeah, that's the story. It's one of those things that'll give you the chills, and you can't help but wonder about what's lurking out there, just beyond the edge of our understanding. Let me tell you about one of the creepiest experiences I've ever had. It all started on a scorching summer night with three of us, Reuben, Josh, and Emily. We were best buds, and our small hometown had this old community pool that we hit up every summer, especially when the heat was unbearable. This place was kind of our secret refuge, where we'd sneak in at night to cool off, because we were convinced it was the best way to escape the summer swelter. Now, here's the twist: the pool was off limits at night, but the grown-ups in town never really told us why. They just said it was too dangerous to be around it in the dark, that it was too deep. And of course, being the daring kids we were, that only fueled our curiosity. So, one fateful night, we decided to take a chance and use the forbidden pool. We waited until the moon was high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over everything. We had our pool noodles, floaties, and a couple of flashlights, you know, all set for some nighttime swimming. As we hopped the rickety fence, the forbidden pool lay there, looking almost sinister under the dim light. But we brushed off the feeling and plunged in, the water cooler than we'd expected. It was all fun and games, splashing around and pretending to be pirates or whatever, with the flashlights bobbing around like lanterns on a ghost ship. Then, the unexpected happened. Reuben, who was always considered the scaredy cat of the group, let out a yelp. He claimed something had brushed against his leg. We couldn't see a thing without the pool lights on, so we laughed it off, teasing him for being jumpy. But then, out of nowhere, it got real spooky. Reuben, who was right there with us one moment, just vanished beneath the water. We reached out, trying to grab him, but it was as if some unseen force had yanked him away at the speed of lightning. Panicking, we scrambled out of the pool, racing towards the security guard's office. We could hear Reuben's screams in the distance, but they soon dwindled into an eerie silence. Our hearts pounded, and terror consumed us. The security guard, an old-timer who'd seen more summers than we could count, came running as soon as he heard us out of breath, frantically explaining what had just happened. We made our way back to the pool, praying for the best but fearing the worst. And there, at the edge of the pool, we found Reuben, soaking wet, trembling like a leaf. His legs had what looked like bite marks, and his body was covered in mysterious scratches. He said that whatever had grabbed him had pulled him under, but he'd managed to grab onto the ladder at the pool's edge, fighting for his life until it finally let him go. The terror in his eyes as he recounted that story sent shivers down our spines. Reuben ended up spending a few days in the hospital, but he never wanted to speak about what happened again. It's like he'd seen something down there, something so horrifying that it was beyond words. The very next day, the pool was demolished, as if they wanted to erase it from existence. To this day, no one in our town wants to talk about it. It's like it never existed, as if there was something they wanted to forget or keep hidden. The older folks wouldn't even make eye contact when you mentioned it. And it just leaves you with this feeling that we had brushed against something beyond our understanding that night. Something ancient and malevolent that lay in wait, hidden beneath the murky waters of that pool. It's a chilling experience, one I'll never forget and one I've never been able to explain. It all happened in a small, forgotten mining town, where my brother Ben and I grew up. The mines had been closed for years, and people were leaving one by one, looking for a better life in the cities. Our parents decided it was time for us to join the exodus, to give us a shot at something more. But before we left, we had one last summer in the town that had been our home. We wanted to do all the things we used to have fun doing, like playing in our rickety old treehouse in the woods near town, making that nostalgic trip to the small toy store that somehow still stayed open, and taking that final, exhilarating dive into the lake. However, we had one last dare, one last adventure on our list. It was something we always talked about but never had the guts to do: visit the old mine that loomed near the lake. You see, this mine was supposed to be haunted. Legend had it that the souls of the miners who lost their lives when the mine collapsed about 30 years ago still lingered there. The older kids who used to dare each other to go in had all left town one by one. So, Ben and I were the last ones standing. As the sun began to set, we entered the mine, determined to break Billy Thompson's record of staying in the mine's last existing tunnel after dark. He'd held the record for 5 years at 1 hour and 3 minutes. The mine was supposed to be simple, just one tunnel, but when we ventured in, it was like stepping into a different world. It was a maze, twisting and turning in directions we'd never seen before. It made no sense. We'd been in here countless times, and it was never this intricate. We brushed off our unease, our hearts pounding, and began to explore. It was like the walls were shifting, the tunnels opening and closing before our eyes. Whispers danced through the air, and we heard faint footsteps echoing from the depths of the mine. Panic set in. We were supposed to be brave, but that was before the place turned into a labyrinth of nightmares. We sprinted, desperately trying to find our way back to the entrance. But it was like the mine itself was toying with us, leading us deeper into its dark heart. The eerie whispers grew louder, more insistent. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and we both felt like something was following us, something we couldn't quite see. After what felt like an eternity, we saw a glimmer of moonlight coming from the entrance, and we ran for it, fueled by sheer terror. But, just as we were about to escape, a chilling, bony hand shot out of the darkness, latching onto Peter's hoodie. I reached out to help him, but whatever had him was strong, way too strong. My heart pounding, I saw my little brother, terror in his eyes, his fingers slipping from mine. His hoodie was torn, and he disappeared into the mine, his cries ringing in my ears. I was screaming his name, tears blurring my vision, but it was no use. He was gone, and I was left with the sound of his screams echoing in the dark. And then, in the blink of an eye, I was outside the cave, lying on the ground, my heart racing, my clothes dirted from the fall. It was as if I'd been yanked out of the mine. To my surprise, my brother was with me. We'd both fallen to the ground with a thunderous bang. My mind must have played a trick on me. I was sure Ben was gone. We didn't look back, didn't try to figure out what had just happened. All we cared about was getting home. We didn't talk about it, not to our parents or anyone else. The next day, we left that town behind, ready for a new start in a new place. But I can't shake the memory of that night, of the mine that was no longer just a haunting legend but a place where we'd come face to face with something otherworldly. It's a story that still gives me shivers, and I'll never know what happened in those dark, labyrinthine tunnels beneath the ground of our old mining town.